Hi, my name is Pat Iyer, and I am so excited to tell you about our virtual conference for legal nurse consultants taking place October 23, 24, and 25. That's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. This is the second virtual LNC conference that we've planned, we being Barbara Levin and I, who is an expert witness and has been a legal nurse consultant for many years. After our July 2020 virtual conference, which was the first ever for legal nurse consultants, we sat down with the evaluations and looked at what our participants wanted for next time. And we built the agenda and the conference around those recommendations and suggestions and comments. This program will focus on giving you the clinical tips and business tips that you need to grow your business and thrive right now. We'll have a variety of speakers who are attorneys, doctors, legal nurse consultants, and business people to share those cutting edge tips with you so that you can thrive in this environment. Some of the highlights of what we'll be covering in this program and what you'll receive will be the opportunity to do a case analysis and watch a mock trial of the defendant nurses who are involved in this case. You will have a chance to find out how hospitals put profits over patient safety. You'll learn some techniques that you can use that when you're speaking to an attorney about a case, that the attorney will be guided to the decision that you are absolutely the best person to receive this case and help the attorney. You'll also get some techniques on dealing with electronic medical records, how to organize them and interpret them. And we have a unique team of an attorney and a legal nurse consultant who will be giving you tips about preparing demonstrative evidence and interpreting audit trails. Those are just a few of the highlights of the 3 days of this conference. We've also mixed in lots of opportunities for networking because that came through as a strong point that people loved with our virtual conference in July, and some fun along the way. You won't be sitting staring at a screen for 3 days. I guarantee you that. Be sure to take advantage of the opportunity to get in on this program. We have a special early bird price that is in effect for only a week. It is a super early bird price. You can get all the details and sign up for the conference at this link, lnc.tips/October 2020 virtual. There's no spaces between the October and the 2020 or between 2020 and virtual. That link again is lnc.tips/October 2020 virtual. Be sure to take advantage of this opportunity to network with your colleagues, make those connections, learn, enjoy, get motivated, inspired, and get the concrete tips that you need for your legal nurse consulting business. Hi, this is Pat Iyer with Legal Nurse Podcast, and I have with me today an expert in communication. I met Marjorie Saulson when we were both part of a coaching program, which we have joined to work on improving our businesses. And as soon as I met Marjorie and realized she specialized in communication, I realized she could bring a lot to you as a person interested in using your communication skills to connect with attorneys. You might also be in a situation where you're invited to give a talk to attorneys. Some of the tips that Marjorie shares today may be just what you're waiting to hear in order to feel comfortable with that process. Marjorie is a communication confidence coach. She's the author of the #1 best-selling book, Empowering Business Owners to Overcome Speaking Fears While You're Talking with One Person or 1,000. She contributed to a book along with a total of 50 women, including Oprah Winfrey and Melinda Gates, who are contributing authors to the book America's Leading Ladies, Stories of Courage, Challenge, and Triumph. Marjorie, thank you for joining me today and welcome to the show.
Pat, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's take you back to where you were in your business when you decided to become involved in helping people with this particular topic. What made you interested in focusing in on communication skills?
Well, that's a story that goes back because my very first business coach said something I've never forgotten. She said, "Your mess is your message." And my mess was I actually didn't even start talking until I was 4 years old. And I was a very shy, tongue-tied introvert. And so it took me a lot of years to get to the point where I felt comfortable communicating. And what's interesting is people talk about public speaking as being the number one fear on the list of fears, ahead of what I call the 3 Ds of death, disease, and divorce.
Mm.
And I consider public speaking not simply giving a speech, which is what most people think of it as, but as any time you talk to somebody other than yourself. So it's on the phone, it's in an interview, it's networking, it's dealing with nosy Aunt Tilly who's asking you questions that are none of her business, and how do you handle that without starting a family feud? And then I ended up getting my master's in audio visual education. And I come from a very strong family of strong women. My mother's 3 older sisters were all suffragettes fighting for the right for women to vote. So for women coming into the power of our voices, especially given the gender bias that still exists in our society, is a real mission and cause for me because I had to struggle to find my voice. And so I like to use what I learned to help other people find theirs.
And isn't it interesting how we come from our own experiences and then become passionate about a topic, as you certainly have, based on your experiences growing up? You mentioned about public speaking being the number one fear, and I know that I've seen that many times. In fact, I'm a member of the National Speakers Association. I bought a t-shirt last summer that says, "Your number one fear is how I make a living."
Oh, that's beautiful. I love it.
Why is it something that we're so afraid of? What's behind that?
Well, it's interesting. Fear is a very important thing to have as part of our lives because fear is designed to keep us safe. So, for example, we wouldn't walk down a dark street with no lighting in a bad neighborhood at night. You know, fear is designed to keep us safe. But the fact of the matter is that when we talk about speaking up, well, why should I be afraid? There's no tiger out there going to pounce on me. The fear of speaking up and speaking out is an emotional fear. It's to keep us from feeling the pain of being judged or criticized. Oh, that's a stupid idea. Or rejected. No way, Jose. Or simply falling flat on our faces and failing. So those are the things that keep us small and keep our results small, are those fears that will be either criticized or rejected or will just outright fail. And so helping people overcome those fears and come into what I call the power of your voice is something that I delight in doing.
Yesterday, I was recording a podcast with a man for a show called Entrepreneurs MBA, and he told me that some people he approaches to be guests on his show refuse because they're afraid that they're going to say something stupid when they're recording.
Well, the interesting thing is perfection is not at all relatable. It's our vulnerabilities, it's our little mistakes, as long as we can handle them with some degree of grace, that make us relatable as people. Every time I can tell you, I mean, I have been studying and working on communication for decades now, and I never give a talk or whatever where I don't do something that's not perfect. And people, there's a couple things. First of all, if you can kind of, oh, I can't believe it came out that way or something, or you to kind of give a little face, or something. People, are really on your side because they feel badly for you when you make a mistake. That's number one. And number two is that they're profoundly grateful that it's you up there talking and not them. So it's really interesting. It's that our perfection, that we think we have to be perfect to keep our authority and expert status and so forth and so on. And one of the things I help people with, by the way, and that people worry about, is being asked a question they can't answer, or they don't know the answer. So I'd like to share that, the little system that I came up with, because when you're in a situation, when you're talking with somebody, especially somebody who thinks he or she knows more than you do, and you're asked a question that you can't answer off the top of your hat. I did come up with a system for that, and if it's all right with you, Pat, I'd like to share it.
I'd love to hear it.
Okay, well, the acronym for this is ACED, A-C-E-D, like I aced the test.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I say what the A is for, you're going to immediately think to yourself, I've heard people do that a million times. It's acknowledge. Oh, that's a very good question, or that's a very interesting question. You acknowledge the question. The whole idea, by the way, is giving your subconscious time to come up with the gift to the answer. And then the C is for clarify. It's my belief that you cannot give a good answer to a bad question. And not all the questions you get are good. Some of them are so broad or so vague that there's no way you could answer that question. So that's when you want to ask for clarification. And don't be afraid to say, I'm not really sure what you're getting at. Could you give me an example of the situation that you'd like me to address? Something along those lines. Force that person to clarify the thinking behind the question before you struggle to answer it. And the E is for elicit. That's not ILL, illegal, illicit. This is ELICET. Elicit, draw out the answer. And if you're in a group of people and you still haven't gotten the gift from your subconscious of an answer, you can say, that's not an area I've studied yet, or I'm not up to date on that. Is there anybody else here who can supply the answer? Or if you're just talking to one person directly, you can say, that's not something I've done a lot of research on. Have you got any ideas about that question? And sometimes just the fact of conversing with you will help that other person come up with an answer. And the D is for either deliver or delay. Either you get this wondrous gift from your subconscious and you're able to answer the question, or you delay. You say, that is not an area that I have personally studied, and I certainly want to give you an accurate answer. Let me get back to you, and let me research and get back to you in a few days. Now, the interesting thing about this is, we human beings, we hate not to know something. We think it's going to blow our credibility and our expert status, and we hate to admit we don't know something. But when you are honestly upfront about the fact that you don't know an answer and you're going to get back to them with the answer, that actually, in my opinion, greatly increases your authority and expert status. People know that when you answer something, they can trust that that is the truth as you understand it. And the fact that you can actually admit you don't know something, people admire that. So it's really counterintuitive. You think if you don't know the answer, it's going to make you look small. But if you use my system, it will really increase people's comfort and trust in what you have to offer and say.
That is a great system, and I'm thinking about it in a couple of contexts. When you're giving a talk to attorneys, perhaps you're doing a webinar for them, you can be asked a question by a participant that you have no idea what they mean. I did a free program yesterday in which somebody put a question in the chat box, and I didn't understand the context. So I'm very comfortable with saying, can you clarify that question? I'm not sure I understand what you mean. And then you get that feedback. I'm also thinking about it in relation to when expert witnesses go into the courtroom and testify. One of the first instructions that the witness gets is If any of my questions are not clear, you understand that you should ask me to clarify them. It also comes up in depositions because the assumption is in the legal system that if you answer a question, you understand what you're answering and you are held to the words that you say. They are locked in stone. It's very difficult for an expert witness to change an answer or later claim, oh, I didn't understand what you were asking me. Well, do you remember that instruction? I told you in the beginning of the deposition that if you didn't understand any question, you need for me to clarify that question for you. So that piece that you just identified, I think gives us a very good framework for going through that process. Now in a trial, the witness can't say, you know, I can't answer that question right now, but I'll get back to you 2 days from now. That piece doesn't
Right.
work. It works well when you're doing a presentation. But in a trial, an expert can say, it can acknowledge the question, can stall by asking the attorney to clarify, to get a little bit more time to think through the answer, and sometimes has to say, I don't know, or that's not in my area of expertise, or I didn't look at that aspect of the case. That was not a significant part for me. So
The
I
truth,
appreciate that framework.
the truth is really the most powerful weapon there is. And as I say, we have to sometimes struggle with our own ego because we when we're brought in, especially as an expert in a situation, to have to admit we don't know something. But honestly, people respect that.
Mm-hmm.
People respect somebody who has the guts to say that's not my area of expertise, or that's not something I have had time to consider, and so I don't want to answer off the top of my head. Well, you may not want to say that, but the truth of the matter is that everybody's BS meter is always on, and this fake it till you make it, especially in a legal situation, is really bad.
The jurors are intelligent people. They can make judgments about witnesses based on their demeanor, on whether they look evasive, are they argumentative. This was an area that I learned to develop skill in over 25 years of testifying. But I can tell you, Marjorie, that the cross-examination part of my testimony was never my favorite part of the role. I didn't enjoy that sparring and
No.
knowing that the attorney's objective was to make me look foolish, incompetent, illogical, all those negative things that we can get caught up in, which brings me to the question I wanted to ask you is we can develop a lot of fear and anxiety about knowing that we're going to be in a position where the attorney's objective is to do that to us, meaning make us look less than competent as part of the strategy of cross-examination. Do you have any suggestions for what to do to deal with that anxiety that we can experience when we are in a speaking situation like that?
Well, first of all, public speaking makes everybody nervous. And when you're in a legal situation and you have somebody who's really trying to bully you, I,
Exactly.
I mean, let's call a spade a spade. They're trying to bully you. So there's some things that you can do to deal with nerves just in general. First of all, there's the mental preparation ahead of time. Don't run horror movies in your mind. Do some visualization about how you handle the entire situation, both the questions from the defense attorney and from the opposing attorney with great calm and confidence. Do not let anybody bulldoze you into answering quickly. It's really important. The other thing is, when you feel any feelings you feel in your body. I mean, your brain interprets them one way or the other, but you're feeling them in your body. So one of the things to do is to give your body the information that you're safe here. So somebody starts, hammering at you, start doing some really deep breathing. Because when you're breathing deeply, your body knows you're not running from a tiger.
Mm-hmm.
And understand that, this guy or gal is doing his or her job. And it's your job to look at that person and evaluate the validity of the question. And I absolutely would use, if there's a question that's really kind of stymied, you say, I don't understand that question. Please clarify just what Pat was sharing. Make the attorney do a better job of asking the question. And, a look of patent disbelief when somebody's really, yeah, as I had shared earlier in my testimony, and be a broken record. If you remember records, some people are probably too young here to remember, but if a record got a scratch in it or something, it would go over the same place over and over again. So the broken record technique is basically to very calmly repeat what you said before. If it's the appropriate answer, just repeat it. And if they try and twist it, say, actually, sir, or ma'am, that is not exactly how I said it. This is what I said. Da 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 da. And the calmer you are, and the more assured you are, I mean, you're the expert. You know what you're talking about. Have faith in yourself. And as I say, don't run those horror movies. Run the movies, Sound of Music version of, where you are just sitting there very calmly and handling any question. And if they ask something you don't know, say, I don't know. I'm not qualified to answer that question. And just be very blunt about it. And that way, when you say that and you give answers to other questions where you are qualified, that increases the credibility of your answers.
Those are great strategies, Marjorie.
Oh, there's one other thing I want to share.
Yes, please.
Everybody gets nervous. I also. And one of the things that happens to me is that my mouth gets really dry. So if you're up there on the witness stand and you're there for whoever knows, and there's no handy glass of water. Nobody's handing you a bottle of water. The thing that you can do, which is a wonderful trick to remember, and I learned this when I was studying to be a voice actor, rub your tongue on the roof of your mouth. Try it. Gets the saliva going in your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, you don't want to do it like that. You want to be subtle about it. But when you rub your tongue on the roof of your mouth, it gets the saliva going and it helps you deal with the dry mouth. And I, frankly, have never been in a situation where I've been in that situation, but I don't know whether it's possible or not to say, I really need a drink of water to continue. I mean, if you've been up there for a long time,
Every courthouse that I've been to in the United States has these carafes of water. They're golden color carafes. But the problem is that the cups are slightly bigger than the kind that you get at the dentist office. Those little tiny ones.
Yeah, kind of the 3 ounce.
Right, right. And you need a lot more than 3 ounces. So I learned to take a couple of those with me to the stand. One time in my pre-testifying anxiety nerve state, I was pouring the water on the attorney's counsel table. I had the carafe in one hand, I had the cup on the table, and I wasn't paying attention to how fast the water was coming out. And it overflowed and it put water everywhere on his table. And the look of horror and disbelief that he gave me.
Oh dear.
Like,
I hope he wasn't the opposing attorney.
He was my client who had paid me to saturate his papers with water. Oh, it was awful.
Yeah.
So we mopped it all up, but of course you can't undo some of the damage. The paper soaks up water awfully fast. So after that, I learned that I had to be exquisitely attentive when I was pouring water, or better yet, bring a bottle of water with me. So yes, it's available, but it's a little bit of a trap if you're not paying
Yeah.
attention to what you're doing.
Well, if you are allowed to bring your own bottle of water, do it. Do it. Because one of the things that happens, at least for me, when I get nervous, my mouth gets dry. And if you have to do a lot of talking and then you start sounding like this, it doesn't, because your mouth gets all dried out. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is a resonant voice is a more authoritative voice. And the resonance you want to access is your chest resonance. And the way you access chest resonance is taking breaths, deep breaths, before you start talking. And then pause. Don't talk in long paragraphs, because when you talk without your chest resonance, it really affects how you sound, as you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was taught about chest resonance using it in my speaking voice from one of my former singing teachers. And she had me practicing something very simple that I'll share with you. She had me practicing saying my name. And at that time, I wasn't using chest resonance when I was speaking. So I would say, I'm Marjorie Saulson. And then taking a breath, I'm Marjorie Saulson. Play around with sentences and words like that. Start developing the habit, if you don't already have it, of supporting your voice with your breath, because you will immediately sound more pleasing to the ear, your own as well as everybody else's. And that kind of resonance carries much more easily in a courtroom, especially if you're not mic'd. And it makes you sound more authoritative automatically.
Mm-hmm. I have heard about some dietary guidelines avoiding dairy products on the day that you're giving a presentation. Is there any truth to that, or is that an old wives'
Yes.
tale?
No, it's not an old wives' tale. Dairy causes a lot of phlegm in your system. All singers are advised to avoid dairy. If you want to start singing, all of a sudden you got a glump something in your throat. The other thing that you want to avoid is you want to avoid lozenges that have ingredients that dry out your voice.
Mm.
And when I mention the two that do it, you are going to be utterly shocked, because they are promoted up one side and down the other. And that's menthol and eucalyptus.
Mm.
Avoid them. They dry out your voice. And the other thing is, speaking of drying out, most of us walk around dehydrated. Your vocal cords love water. And so if you know you're going to be on the witness stand, the day before, tank up.
But
In
not the
fact,
morning of.
yeah, when I was studying, as I say, to be a voice actor, the advice I got was to drink half of your body weight in ounces of water. Now, I must confess, I don't really get there. But if you
Wow.
weigh 100 pounds, that's 50 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you start out and your body's dehydrated already, the other thing is, don't forget your brain. A huge percent of your brain is water. So if you want your brain to be functioning optimally, it's got to be hydrated too.
Which means no alcohol the day before as well, since that dehydrates you.
That and caffeine.
Mm. Interesting, Marjorie. I never thought about that. I do know the importance of controlling your water intake when you're going to be on the witness stand for at
Yes.
least a couple of hours, because that can get really unpleasant.
Yeah. That's why I
But
say
the
tank
day
up the day
before,
before.
yeah, the day before makes a lot of sense. We've talked this morning, as we've been recording this podcast, about some speaking techniques when you're testifying as an expert, when you are making a presentation to attorneys, even situations where you're talking on the phone with an attorney and you are working on communicating clearly. Is there any last minute bit of advice that you can share with our audience before I ask you to share your contact information?
Absolutely. Remember, gender bias is alive and well. Also, what I call status bias. You are an expert. I want you to gird your loins, so to speak, with the knowledge that you have information that's of value, that's important, that you are important. All you've learned through the years is important. The foundation, in my opinion, of communication confidence is knowing that you have a valuable message to share. So remember that. And if you get anybody trying to kind of downplay your expertise or make you feel less than, don't let them do that. Don't let them do that. Remind them, you can say, I get the feeling that maybe you're not quite confident in the level of expertise that I bring to the table. Is that so? Call them on it. Don't let somebody downgrade you, or especially if it's a male attorney to a female nurse. You've got a couple biases working against you. So keep in mind that you have an important gift to share. That attorney has no case whatsoever without you. None, zero, zip. You are an important part of the process. Remember it.
That's resounding advice. I say to nurses, remember, if you can stand up to an angry physician, you can stand up to an angry attorney.
That's for sure.
How can our listener find out more about you and the services that you offer, Marjorie?
Well, I invite everybody to go to my website. It's vibrantvocalpower.com. That's exactly what I want you to have. And if you put a / and write the word legal afterward, vibrantvocalpower.com / legal, you can get a copy of my complimentary ebook on communication confidence. And there's a ton of, there's 10 powerful pathways for overcoming your public speaking fears. When I updated it recently, I added how to get your nerves to serve you instead of sabotage you. There's quite a bit in there, Pat, about the fears of criticism and rejection and failure, and a lot of handy hints on how to counter those. So I think that complimentary ebook will be very helpful. Again, it's at vibrantvocalpower.com / legal.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marjorie, for being part of the show. I appreciate you sharing your experiences and your tips with our listener.
It's been my pleasure and honor. And as a flaming feminist myself, for your female listeners, all I have to say is go for it. You deserve all the best. And I think it's vitally important work that you do, and you appreciate yourself for all that you do.
Thank you, Marjorie. And thank you to you who's either listening to this show on all of the audio channels in which Legal Nurse Podcast is carried, or you're watching the show on our YouTube channel at Legal Nurse Business. Be sure to take Marjorie's tips to heart. Think about them the next time your nerves are jangled when you have to make a presentation of any kind. If you're an expert witness, I think the most valuable tip that we've talked about today is the mindset piece, although we didn't label it as mindset, but recognizing your authority, your knowledge, and your ability to communicate your opinions clearly and confidently. Thanks so much. Hi, this is Pat Iyer with Legal Nurse Podcast, and I have with me today Rachel Cartwright Van Zandt, who just finished recording a podcast with me. And I know you're going to want to know what this legal nurse consultant covers in her podcast. Rachel, what are the things that our listener or our viewer is going to get from your program?
Well, it's going to be really a lot of information
Sorry.
that's going to be focused.
Sorry, we have to start this again.
Oh, okay.
I should have had the ringer on. Silence. Okay, we'll do this again. Hi, this is Pat Iyer with Legal Nurse Podcast, and I have with me today Dr. Rachel Cartwright Van Zandt, who is a nurse, a legal nurse consultant. We just finished recording a podcast, and I know you're going to want to hear what Rachel, as a legal nurse consultant and as a nurse and as a risk manager, will be covering in her program. Rachel, what is the big takeaway subject matter that you'll be going through?
I think probably the key things that we talked about are not only the legal exposures that still exist, certainly with electronic medical records, and some tools and techniques that legal nurse consultants can utilize in their business, as well as nurses that are still active at the bedside. What are some strategies to reduce your liability exposure? So electronic medical records covers both of those entities. And then just a summary on how to best document the care that you do to keep you out of litigation.
And after what we go through as legal nurse consultants helping attorneys, boy, we don't ever want to be part of that system ourselves personally. So be sure to come back and watch the podcast with Dr. Rachel Cartwright Van Zandt on electronic medical records and documentation.